So welcome to another edition of the Secure Dynamics TechCast. With me, past guest, Mike Manrod, who is the CISO of Grand Canyon Education. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you, Ashwin. Good to be here.
Absolutely. And picking on a topic that I don't think has been given as much attention, but it's something that I was actually intrigued by reading something on LinkedIn about 4 or 5 days ago. A CISO of a fairly well-known B2C company was talking about publicly on LinkedIn. He had posted this saying, hey, I hit the unsubscribe button. Mr. and Mrs. Salesperson, don't you get it? It doesn't mean that I'm exposing myself as a human being and therefore you can hit me up. And there were lots of people obviously piling on that saying, yeah, I get hit with these inane sales calls and emails too. And there was one comment which actually was from a potential customer of the company the CISO works for. And he or she said, hey, by the way, have you talked to your sales or marketing organization? I'm getting hit with similar sounding inane emails from your organization. What do you have to say to that? So he raised his hand and said, mea culpa, and the conversation continued. But then there was another CISO that jumped on it, saying very much the same thing. The other CISO saying, hey, I'm getting hit with this up too. And then that thread continued with salespeople falling on each other saying, hey, by the way, we have a job to do, we have families to feed, so on and so forth. So long story short, the second CISO, and I'll share this link with when we share our conversation on social media, but it was so humbling because he had gone on record saying, I need to hit the pause button. I had to go engage with my counterpart, understanding from a top salesperson as to what their job is. And I feel that I was not being empathetic. I was not being understanding when I just jumped on this social troll, if you will. So Mike, talk a little bit about how does a CISO's world, when he or she is trying to protect her organization from breaches and attacks and reducing the risk, how does that sometimes compartmentalize, if you will, that group of people, and then not quite maybe building bridges inside the organization? How important is that?
Well, I love that question and this topic. I have a unique perspective on this because I've been on both sides of it, having been a security engineer on the vendor side and having had roles that are sales oriented. I can sort of understand both sides of the equation a little bit. It is tough. I have a friend who recently was actually applying for a job, and she's actually trying to get into cybersecurity. And a similar parallel scenario, she made a very small mistake in her communication etiquette, and this person from a very large firm jumped on her, sent a pretty scathing email. And in my conversation with her, because she was pretty upset, I said, look, he was wrong. Clearly, he shouldn't have acted that way. But remember, he probably had 3 hours sleep last night, came out of a meeting where some senior executive was yelling at him, and this was like the 11th thing to go wrong that day, and it was only 9 a.m. So I think it's this weird thing where on one hand, on the sales side, we have to have empathy and compassion for the roles we're selling to. But then on the vendor side, whatever role we're in, we have to have empathy for the people who are trying to make a living selling to us. One thing I think about on this too, though, is a lot of it on the vendor side is it's a wine pairing. Some wines and foods go better together, others don't. I remember when I was a new analyst in security, I was happy to get a call from somebody, even if it was a really entry-level salesperson making their very first call, because I'd been staring at a screen for 6 hours. I hadn't heard from anybody, and I was just glad to take the break from the ice train and talk to a human being, even if I didn't care about the product. And then fast forward to now, there's sometimes 20, 30 sales calls in a day. The one I answer, I might have answered by accident because they spoof your local area code. So I think it's maybe some executive calling that I need to answer. I've got 5 minutes between meetings to either get caffeine or to answer that call, and answer that call. And I really have to struggle to be patient and time. Yeah. So I think some of it's wine pairing, right? Pairing the right level person. If you only have 2 minutes that you catch an exec, make sure who's calling is really technical and makes that such a meaningful conversation that the exec or technical expert you reach, if they have a decade or 2 experience, is happy to show up 5 minutes late to the next meeting because you taught them something. Yeah.
So Mike, you mentioned something which is very interesting to me also, because as you were talking, one of the things that came to mind is another thing which we've talked about in the past. Helen Patton, CISO of Ohio State University. So she also is extremely vocal and always tries to kind of build bridges, much like you do. And one of the things she's been talking publicly is helping vendor marketing and sales be more effective in their jobs. And one of the things she's been talking about is, hey, when you send me an email, send me a 2-minute video about everything your company does. Don't send me a link to a data sheet. Don't send me a webinar recording. I don't have time for that, right? Just 2 minutes. Now, I think part of that is also like what we were discussing is from a CISO's own community, and she was talking to the broader community, but imagine if every CISO were to kind of take that level of understanding and reach out to his or her CMO or chief sales officer and say, let me understand a little bit better, because I'm on the other side. I'm receiving a lot of these calls, and this is what appeals to me. So can I help make our company a better sales company, a better marketing company, and build that, which is something we don't usually talk about, right? It was our own experiences on one side, like you said, but then how do you translate that into more effective engagement within your own organization?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I love that suggestion. I love the idea of sending a short video. One caveat I'd throw to sending a white paper or a video or a quick data sheet, that resonates with me also. I frequently say the same thing or request the same thing. One thing that's really useful as well is if you link to, or I'll pick on somebody I obviously know well. If I had never heard of Palo Alto, which obviously I have, and I got an email with a link and an attachment and all this, now I have to analyze all these things, upload the PDF to sandboxes first, open it in a VM, do all these things. Whereas if they said, go to our website and search for this, or go to YouTube and search for this quick string, then I don't have to, I know YouTube's safe. I've obviously researched YouTube. I don't have to go, there's not as much burden to view it. Yeah, if you keep it to like a 90-second burden, then yeah, you can really capture somebody's attention in that 90 seconds and they'll want to learn more.
That's a great call out. So you're actually shifting the burden of ensuring that there's no malware, there is no nefarious content onto a cloud provider, which is hosting it, right? So I love the fact versus actually sending a MP4 attachment and then you're worried about, hey, what could that do?
Yeah, what's in this?
Yeah, exactly, right. And so that fear sets, and so that's a great call out. So final 2 minutes. I know we've been talking about this pandemic. I think this is month 4 of our conversation through the pandemic. What are some of the things that have emerged for you that is muscle memory for you and your team that you think is going to be the new normal going forward, even if we were to go back to, let's say, an in-face engagement?
Well, I think one thing that has emerged is the world has really realized the power of Zoom. I mean, I think that if we would have met a year sooner, we would have probably had a lot of in-person meetings. Right. And it probably would have taken much longer for us to begin collaborating. I think a lot of people will work more remote. I think we'll see a lot more decentralization. I think the virtual happy hours that can connect people across the country or across the world will continue, as opposed to confined to, all right, who can we round up in Scottsdale, or who can we round up in San Jose? Now all of a sudden the boundaries are fuzzier, and because of it, what we can accomplish is greater.
I couldn't agree more. And I think one of the things that as you were mentioning, is the fact that anybody can reach out to anybody else really means that, back to our original conversation, is anybody who's reaching out needs to have a purpose behind it, and they need to know what they're talking about over here. Because I mean, the days of keynote speaking, it's like, hey, let's all sit in the audience and wait for the keynote speaker. Everybody is a keynote speaker. Do you have a keynote? Do you have anything worthy of speaking? And then how do you connect with, right? So yeah, I think this is all absolutely true. I mean, I can completely engage with you on that one. And like I said, like you mentioned, you and I have been talking virtually for 6 months right now, and we feel like, hey, we're the best of buddies, right? Even though we've not met physically. So that's amazing. Again, Mike, always great chatting with you, and looking forward to our next one.
Awesome. Thank you. Likewise, Ashwin.
Thanks, Mike.